The generator still hums. That is the first thing Thomas notices when he pushes through the jungle growth toward the concrete building on the hill. 3 months since the last American ship disappeared over the horizon. 3 months since the war moved north, chasing the Japanese toward their home islands. 3 months, and the generator still hums. He was not supposed to be here. The elders said to wait. Let the jungle take it back, they said. Let the vines reclaim what the foreigners built. But Thomas is 17 years old, and 17-year-old boys do not wait well. The building rises from the green like a monument to impossible things. Not the thatched medicine hut his grandmother maintains in the village. Not the bamboo shelter where babies are born on woven mats. Something else entirely. The Japanese told them the Americans were devils, barbarians who would burn their villages and defile their women, monsters without souls who knew only destruction. Everything they said was a lie. If this story moves you, please hit that like button and subscribe. These moments from history deserve to be remembered. The generator hums because it is fuel. Thomas sees a drum stack behind the building, 55-gallon barrels painted olive green, dozens of them, enough to power the machine for years. The Americans did not take them when they left. They did not take anything when they left. Thomas's fingers traced the doorframe. Real wood, not jungle timber, but something brought from across the ocean, sanded smooth and painted white. The paint has not even begun to peel. The hinges do not squeak when he pushes the door open. The smell hits him next. Antiseptic, chemical clean. Nothing like the smoke and earth and living green that permeates every structure his people build. This smells like the future would smell if the future could be bottled and poured into walls. His eyes adjust to the interior light. Windows, real glass windows, letting the tropical sun filter through screens that keep the insects out. The floor is not dirt, not even wood. Something smooth and cold beneath his bare feet. Concrete, he thinks, though he has never stood on concrete before the Americans came. The tables are still here. Examination tables, though he does not know to call them that. 4 of them, spaced evenly across the main room, each covered in white cloth that somehow remains white despite 3 months of tropical humidity. Chrome instruments catch the light from the windows, scissors and forceps and things whose purposes he can only guess at, all arranged in perfect rows on smaller tables beside each bed. The Japanese had a medical station too, during their occupation. Thomas remembers it. A tent with a dirt floor where the wounded soldiers screamed while a doctor with cruel hand performed surgeries without enough medicine to stop the pain. The Japanese took their own wounded when they retreated. They took their equipment too. They took everything they could carry and burned what they could not. The Americans did not take anything. Thomas moves deeper into the building. Another room. More tables, but different, smaller, with strange mechanical arms extending from the walls. Later he will learn these are dental chairs. Now they are simply marvels. Chrome and leather and adjustment mechanisms, so smooth they move without sound. Cabinets line the walls. He opens one carefully, half expecting it to be empty, stripped clean like the Japanese left everything. Instead, bottles. Hundreds of bottles. Brown glass and clear glass and blue glass, each labeled in English words he cannot read. He pulls one down. The liquid inside slushes, still liquid, still good, whatever it is. Bandages fill another cabinet, white rolls stacked floor to ceiling. Surgical masks in sealed paper packages. Rubber gloves still in their boxes. They left it all. In the corner, something that looks like a large metal box on wheels. He approaches it cautiously, the way his grandfather taught him to approach unfamiliar things. The box hums softly, connected to the generator somehow, powered even now. He finds a handle, pulls it open. Cold air washes over his face. Impossible cold, like mountain air but from inside a metal box. Vials lined up in racks inside, each one labeled, each one perfectly preserved. He does not know what vaccines are. He does not know that this refrigerator contains enough medicine to protect his entire island from diseases that have killed his people for generations. He only knows that the Americans built a machine that makes winter inside itself, and they left it running. A sound from outside. Footsteps. Thomas spins. Suddenly aware he is trespassing, though trespassing on what he cannot say. Is this building his people's now? Or does it still belong to the men who built it, even though they are gone? His uncle appears in the doorway. Kai, the closest thing their village has to a leader since the war killed the chief. Kai's face holds an expression Thomas has never seen there before. Not anger, not surprise, something closer to wonder, or perhaps fear. You should not be here, Kai says, but his voice carries no conviction. The generator is still running, Thomas replies. Kai enters slowly, his eyes moving across the room the way Thomas's did, trying to comprehend what he is seeing. They left instructions, he says quietly, in the village office. Drawings, English words and pictures showing how to use everything. Why? The question hangs in the air between them. Why would conquerors leave behind such wealth? Why would warriors give away weapons against disease and death? Why would white men from across the ocean care where the brown-skinned islanders they barely knew lived or died? Kai moves to one of the examination tables, runs his hand across the white cloth. The Japanese told us stories about them, he says. Said they were beasts who lived only for destruction. He looks up at Thomas. But beasts do not build hospitals and leave them behind for their enemies. We were not their enemies. The Japanese said we were. Said any island that welcomed the Americans would be punished, destroyed, made an example of. Kai's jaw tightens with a memory. But the Americans came, and they built. They did not burn our village. They did not take our women. They dug wells so we would have clean water. They paved roads so we could reach each other in the rainy season. They brought medicine when the fever came, treated our children the same as their own soldiers. Thomas has heard these stories from the elders, but hearing them here, standing in this temple of American efficiency, makes them real in a new way. And now they are gone. Yes. Kai moved to the cabinets, opens them one by one as Thomas did, his wonder growing with each discovery. They left everything. The generators, the water pumps, the schoolhouse on the other side of the island, desks for 40 students, books in English and drawings that show how things work. The machine shop with tools our craftsmen have never seen. The radio equipment that can speak to ships 1,000 miles away. Why? Thomas asks again. Kai is quiet for a long moment. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of realization. Because they thought we might need it. Because they believed we deserved better than what we had. Because somewhere in their minds, in their culture, in their strange foreign hearts, there's an idea that even people they barely know deserve hospitals and schools and clean water. He turns to face Thomas directly. The Japanese occupied us for 3 years. They took our young men to build their fortifications. They took our food to feed their soldiers. They took our boats so we could not fish. When they left, they burned what they could not carry. They left us with less than we had before they came. The Americans were here 18 months, Thomas says, knowing where this is leading but needing to hear it said. 18 months, Kai confirms. And they left us with more than we ever had. They left us with tools to heal our sick, equipment to teach our children, infrastructure to make our lives easier. They left us with running water. Thomas, do you understand? Turn a handle and clean water comes out. No more walking 2 miles to the river. They left us with electricity so we can have light after the sun sets. They left us with a future they knew they would not be here to see. Thomas looks around the hospital again, seeing it now not as an abandoned building but as a gift. An impossible, extravagant, inexplicable gift from strangers who owed them nothing. What do we do with it? He asks. Kai's expression shifts, hardening with determination. We learn. We learn to read those English instructions until we can operate every machine they left. We learn to maintain the generators and the water pumps and the radio equipment. We learn to use this hospital to heal our people, to give them the medical care the Americans gave their own soldiers. He pauses, and we remember that the world contains different kinds of power. The Japanese showed us the power to destroy and take. The Americans showed us the power to build and give. We remember which kind of power we want to become. They stand together in the silence, the generator humming beneath their feet, the refrigerator preserving medicines that will save lives not yet born, the instruments gleaming in the tropical sun, waiting for hands that will learn to use them. Outside, the jungle presses close. But inside these walls, the jungle has no dominion. Inside these walls, a different kind of civilization has planted roots, One built not on conquest but on the radical idea that strangers on the far side of the world might deserve running water and electric lights and medicine for their children. Thomas touches one of the chrome instruments, feels the cool metal beneath his fingers. 3 months ago, he watched the last American transport disappear over the horizon, taking the foreign soldiers back to their incomprehensibly distant homeland. He thought he would never see them again. He was wrong. They are here, in every light switch and water pipe, in every surgical tool and textbook, in every can of food and roll of bandages. They are here in the generator that still hums and the medicine that still works and the building that still stands against the wind and rain. They built a hospital and left it behind, not as a monument to themselves, not as a reminder of their power, but as a gift to people they would never see again, on an island most Americans could not find on a map. The Japanese told them the Americans were devils. But devils do not build hospitals and walk away. February 9th, 1946. The first baby delivered in the American hospital is a girl. Her mother labors on one of the examination tables, attended by the village midwife and 2 women who have been studying the English medical manuals for 5 months, sounding out words they do not understand, but following diagrams that show them exactly how sterile technique works, exactly how to recognize complications, exactly how to respond. The birth is easy. As births go, the mother is young and healthy. The baby emerges pink and screaming into the antiseptic clean air of a room maintained at exactly the temperature the American diagrams specify. The midwife cuts the umbilical cord with scissors sterilizing the autoclave they have learned to operate. She wraps the infant in blankets from the supply cabinet, fresh, white, soft American blankets that smell like they were made yesterday instead of 2 years ago when a factory in Pennsylvania packed them for shipment to a war zone. They name her Amelia, after the American nurse who taught them how to use the equipment before she left. The nurse who spent her final 3 weeks on the island drawing pictures and acting out procedures, pointing to words in the manuals and speaking slowly so the island women could learn. The nurse who cried when she boarded the transport ship, not because she was sad to leave, but because she was happy they would have the tools they needed. Amelia is born into a world her grandparents could not have imagined. She is born in a hospital with electric lights and running water. She will be immunized against diseases that killed 3 of her grandmother's 7 children. She will learn to read in a schoolhouse with real desks and books. She will grow up drinking water that does not make her sick, eating food preserved in refrigerators, living in a village connected to a larger world by radio equipment that spans oceans. She will grow up free because the Americans came and fought the Japanese away. She will grow up healthy because the Americans left their hospital behind. The scholar reading this report in the National Archives does not know about Amelia specifically. The scholar knows about Operation Cartwheel, the Allied offensive that drove through the Pacific in 1943 and 1944. The scholar knows about the strategic importance of certain islands, about airfields and supply lines, and the inexorable advance toward Japan. What the scholar is discovering, reading through after-action reports and construction logs and supply manifests, is something the military planners perhaps did not fully articulate but certainly understood. Building infrastructure on captured Pacific islands was not just about winning the war. It was about winning the peace. The documents are specific, detailed, almost compulsive in their completeness. CBs, Naval Construction Battalions, received orders not just to build military facilities but to construct civilian infrastructure, wells for fresh water, roads connecting villages, schoolhouses, medical clinics, electrical generators with enough fuel to run for years after the military departed. One report, dated August 7, 1945, 3 days after the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, outlines a transition plan for American facilities in the Pacific Theater. The war is clearly ending. The military planners can see it, and their instructions are unambiguous. Prepare civilian populations to inherit what we built. Leave the generators. Leave the medical equipment. Leave the tools and the fuel and the supplies. Create manuals with pictures for people who cannot read English. Train local leaders in basic maintenance. Make sure the water pumps keep running after we are gone. Why? The report does not say explicitly. Military documents rarely speak in philosophical terms. But the implication is clear in the specificity of the orders, in the care taken to ensure continuity, in the resources allocated to transitions that would benefit people who would never serve in the American military, never vote in American elections, never pay American taxes. Because it mattered. Because somewhere in the American consciousness, even in the midst of total war, even in the face of an enemy who fought with suicidal ferocity, there was still room for the idea that building was better than destroying. That leaving infrastructure behind was an investment in a future where yesterday's battlefield might be tomorrow's ally. That people on remote islands deserve hospitals and schools not because it served American interests, but because it was the right thing to do. The Japanese built fortifications and left nothing but scars when they retreated. The Americans built hospitals and schools and left them operating. The scholar makes notes, highlights passages, begins to construct a narrative about soft power and cultural values, about the difference between empires of extraction and project of development. The scholar is not wrong in this analysis, but the scholar, sitting in an air-conditioned archive room in Washington, cannot fully capture what it meant on the ground, cannot fully capture what it meant to Thomas, discovering that impossible building on the hill, cannot fully capture what it meant to Amelia's mother, giving birth in clean safety instead of bloody risk, cannot fully capture what it meant to the island's children, learning to read in a schoolhouse with real books, cannot fully capture the moment when people who have been subjects of Japanese occupation realize that not all conquerors are the same, that some come to take and some come to build, and the difference matters more than words can express. 1949. The generator finally stops. It runs for 4 years and 3 months after the last American soldier leaves the island. 4 years and 3 months of continuous operation, humming in the background of island life like a heartbeat, powering the hospital and the water pumps and the lights that push back the tropical night. When it finally dies, the island's maintenance crew, men trained by Americans who never expected to see them again, disassemble it piece by piece. They find the problem, a bearing worn beyond function, a part that cannot be salvaged or improvised. The machine has given everything it can. But the Americans, in their obsessive planning, left spare parts. In a warehouse behind the hospital, climate controlled by a second generator that still runs, crates of replacement components wait in perfect preservation. The manual shows exactly which bearing fits where. The diagrams show exactly how to install it. The generator runs again by sunset. It will run for another 23 years before the island's leaders decide to upgrade to new equipment. By then, the island has its own technical school where young people learn electrical engineering and mechanical maintenance. By then, the American hospital has trained 2 generations of nurses and midwives. By then, the island's mortality rate has dropped by 70% compared to the pre-war years. By then, everyone who remembers the Japanese occupation is old. Everyone who remembers the Americans arriving is middle-aged. The rising generation knows only the world the Americans left behind, a world with hospitals and schools and clean water and electric light. They do not think of it as American anymore. It is simply theirs. The infrastructure has become so integral to island life that imagining existence without it requires an act of historical imagination. But the old people remember. Kai, who stood with young Thomas in the hospital that first day, is 73 years old when he finally speaks to the island council about what should be done with the original American buildings. Some want to tear them down, build more modern facilities. The concrete is cracking. They say, the equipment is outdated. Better to start fresh. Kai stands slowly. His body has aged, but his mind remains sharp. I was there, he says, when we discovered what they left us. I remember what we had before they came. I remember what the Japanese took from us. And I remember what the Americans gave us, even though they owed us nothing, even though we would never see them again. He gestures toward the hospital on the hill, still standing, still functional after nearly 3 decades. Tear it down if you must. Build something newer if you can. But do not forget what it represents. Do not forget that the world contains different kinds of power, and we have the choice of which kind we want to embody. The council votes to preserve the original hospital as a museum. The new medical center rises beside it, equipped with modern technology purchased with the island's own resources, staffed by doctors trained in programs the American hospital made possible. But the old building remains. The examination tables, the dental chairs, the cabinet still full of supplies that have long since expired but remain as testament. The generator, no longer running but preserved in place. Its fuel drums empty but present. Tourists come now sometimes. The island is no longer remote in the way it once was. The children and grandchildren of American servicemen who fought in the Pacific visit to see where their fathers and grandfathers served. They walk through the hospital museum and read the plaques explaining what they are seeing. The plaques do not say, "Americans were here." They say, "Americans built this and left it behind for us." The difference matters. 2024. A historian named Jennifer Chen publishes a book about American infrastructure projects in the Pacific Theater during World War II. The book is not widely read. Military history has a limited audience, and infrastructure projects are not as exciting as battle narratives. But the book contains a chapter about the islands. The chapter contains photographs. The original American hospital, still standing. The schoolhouse with its rows of desks. The water treatment facility that operated for 4 to 7 years before being replaced. The tools still in use, maintained and repaired and eventually passed down as heirlooms. The chapter contains interviews. Amelia, the first baby born in the American hospital, is now 78 years old. She is a retired nurse who spent her career in the medical center built beside the original American facility. She speaks about generational change, about how her grandmother gave birth on a woven mat in a bamboo hut and she gave birth in an air-conditioned hospital with fetal monitoring equipment. 3 generations, from pre-industrial to modern, in one lifetime. She speaks about the Americans who built the hospital. "They did not know me," she says. "They did not know my mother. They built it anyway. They left it anyway. Because somewhere in their culture, in their values, there was room for the idea that strangers desired care." The historian asks about the Japanese occupation. Amelia's face tightens. "They took everything. Food, boats, young men to work until they died building fortifications. When they left, they burned what they could not carry. They wanted to leave us with nothing. And the Americans, they wanted to leave us with everything." The historian publishes the interview. A few thousand people read it. Most move on to other things. But some remember. Some think about the difference between taking and giving, between destroying and building, between leaving nothing and leaving everything. Some think about what it means to have power and choose to use it for something other than extraction and domination. Some think about hospitals on remote islands, still standing decades after the builders departed, still serving people the builders never met. The generator hums. This is where we started, with young Thomas discovering that impossible fact. 3 months after the Americans left, and the generator still hums. But now we understand what it means. It means someone filled those fuel drums and calculated they would last. Someone maintained the machine before departing. Someone cared enough to ensure continuity, to plan for a future they would not witness. It means someone somewhere in the American military structure made a decision that infrastructure mattered, that leaving islands better than they were found mattered, that people on remote atolls in the Pacific Ocean deserve hospitals and schools and clean water, not because it served strategic interests, but because it served human dignity. The generator hums because someone valued competence over extraction, building over destroying, giving over taking. The Japanese told the islanders the Americans were devils, barbarians, destroyers of civilization. But devils do not calculate fuel requirements for generators they will never see again. Barbarians do not leave medical manuals with detailed illustrations so illiterate villagers can learn to save lives. Destroyers do not build water treatment plants designed to operate for decades. The generator hums, and in its hum is a question that echoes across 80 years of history. What kind of power do we want to be? The kind that takes everything and leaves nothing? Or the kind that builds hospitals and walks away? The kind that treats conquered populations as resources to be extracted? Or the kind that sees strangers on remote islands as human beings who deserve clean water and medicine? The kind that leaves scars? Or the kind that leaves generators still humming? The generator hums, and in that hum is an answer that transcends military strategy and geopolitical calculation, and all the complex machinery of war and empire. The answer is simple. Build, give, leave it better than you found it. The generator hums, and somewhere, on an island in the Pacific, someone turns on a light switch and clean water flows from a tap, and a child receives a vaccination, and a mother gives birth safely, and the future unfolds in ways the American Seabees who built it all could never have imagined but would, perhaps, recognize. The generator hums, because once, long ago, someone decided it should. Because once, Long ago, someone believed that even strangers on distant islands deserved the tools to build better lives. Because once, long ago, power chose to build instead of destroy. The generator hums, and that choice echoes still.